France, Portugal, Spain, all those countries that are buying cotton from us. All of a sudden, we can't supply that cotton anymore because our men are fighting instead of in the fields. We've got, we lose our slaves. We can't supply cotton, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they'll go, oh, gosh, we need to help the U.S. because we need our cotton. So that was their thinking. Okay? So let's see. So as the Confederacy begins, look at this photo of Fort Moultrie in South Carolina. Now, if you recall, South Carolina threatened to secede once. Does anybody remember the name of that incident? Yes. Good, the nullification crisis. Now, Fort Moultrie is just outside Charleston, South Carolina. And if you look over here in the distance, there is another fort there. That happens to be Fort Sumter. Okay? Now, Fort Sumter is a federal fort, but because the South has said, hey, we're not part of the United States anymore, this is not your fort, it is now the South's fort. And they took any act of aggression seriously. In other words, if they said, Lincoln, hey, if you resupply that fort with guns and weapons and so on, we're going to look at it as an act of aggression. So Lincoln kind of had a problem here. It's like he doesn't want to be told what to do by the South, but he doesn't want to inadvertently start the Civil War. You know what I mean? So we'll talk about that in a minute. But Fort Moultrie, you can see here that, you know, I'm going to switch the picture. This is 1860. This is 1861. Okay? 1860.
It's like I'm at the eye doctor.
1861, right. Does A look better or B?
Yeah.
Okay, anyway. All right, so what are some differences? Raise your hand. What are some differences that you see from 1 year? What you got?
There's less cannons.
Okay, there's less cannons. You mean there's less cannons from this one to this one? Okay. Jada.
Well, like in the left-hand bottom corner, like there's less grass and stuff.
Right, it's a little bit more fortified right here. Whoops. Yes.
There's like a bunch of sandbags piled up on the top left.
All right, definitely a big difference. Those are for bunkers and fortifying the walls and so on. What you see?
The little strings on the right above that one cannon.
The strings.
On the left.
On the left, there's like some strings.
I see. It kind of looks like a flag's hanging here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a.
Yeah.
It's the American flag.
Now remember, in the old pictures, because the exposure time was very long, you had to stay still. So if that flag was waving or moving while the picture was being taken, it would appear blurry. That's probably why it looks like that. Okay, of course that's missing.
One has more greenery.
Big old pile of dirt.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is probably used to fill some of those sandbags.
A wall right there.
There's a giant pile of dirt on the left.
Huh?
There's a giant pile of dirt in front of the stairs.
Yep, for sure. This one right here. What about,
Run down.
what are those?
Thing in the very back now.
Cannonballs. Okay, so we definitely see the difference. They are making an active effort to defend what they believe is theirs.
What's the thing in the 1861?
The back, there's like a.
Yeah, the
Looks
very
like a
back.
bunch of
It looks
people.
like an army maybe.
We said the Fort Sumter. That's Fort Sumter.
That's Fort Sumter. All right. Now, Fort Sumter is a fort outside of the harbor of Charleston, as I had told you, and it needed supplies. So Lincoln had the decision, you know, do I supply this and cause the war? He said, but I don't want to be told what to do, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to just go ahead and send them general supplies. Not weapons, not gunpowder, anything like that, just general food supplies. And he did. But the South wasn't going to have it. Now here we see where Fort Sumter is located. And you can see what an advantage it would be to have this fort. Fort Moultrie, as you can see there, that's the one that we showed you in the picture. So it was easy for them to just, okay. So we send supplies. And I have this beautiful film that tells a beautiful, not beautiful story, it's a war story, about what happened at the Battle of Fort Sumter.
The Civil War began at 4:30 a.m. on the 12th of April, 1861. General Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard ordered his Confederate gunners to open fire on Fort Sumter. At that hour, only a dark shape out in Charleston Harbor. Confederate Commander Beauregard was a gunner, so skilled as an artillery student at West Point that his instructor kept him on as an assistant for another year. That instructor was Major Robert Anderson, Union commander inside Fort Sumter. All the pent-up hatred of the past months and years is voiced in the thunder of these cannon, and the people seem almost beside themselves in the exaltation of a freedom they deem already won. The signal to fire the first shot was given by a civilian, Edmund Ruffin, a Virginia farmer and editor, who had preached secession for 20 years. Of course, he said, I was delighted to perform the service. 34 hours later, a white flag over the fort ended the bombardment. The only casualty had been a Confederate horse. It was a bloodless opening to the bloodiest war in American history. The first gun that was fired at Fort Sumter sounded the death knell of slavery. They who fired it were the greatest practical abolitionists this nation has produced. April 13th. So civil war is inaugurated at last. God defend the right.
Okay, so that's how the Civil War began. This is a picture of the devastation. It's really shocking. I mean, I like what that guy said in the film about, it was the beginning, the bloodless battle that started the bloodiest war in our history, and it was true. Now today, you can go to Charleston, and you can get a ferry, and you can go out into the harbor and visit Fort Sumter. It's pretty cool. As you can tell by the picture, this is just the first level, where in the past it was like 2 or 3 levels higher than that. But they did use it for a while as an arsenal. This is a bunker that goes down into the ground. They used to have weapons. Today there's a museum, and there's artifacts from the battle, and it talks about different people that were there. It's pretty cool. So if you ever get an opportunity to do that, it's pretty fun. And they've got all the cannons there in the courtyards and stuff underneath here. So, and they're huge. Okay, so after this, technically war is declared. Now, and that's on both sides. Now remember, we still have 4 other states that are still contemplating war. We've got Virginia, Tennessee, Missouri, and I want to say, what was the other one? Arkansas. And they're still contemplating whether or not to secede or not. Well, after these come out, on both sides, Friends of the South and Justice to Arms, let's see, they're calling for recruitment posters. Union blood rifle guards without delay. The South strikes the first blow. Okay, so now that's where everybody's starting to gather their armies. So, what do we do with ours? No, go ahead and add this. Skip a line. Or no, you don't have to skip a line. We're all on page 61. Go ahead and get this information down.
Do we title it the same as February? Title it the same.
You can, yeah, Civil War continued. Ooh, and I have a cool sound effect. Boom! I knew you'd all be impressed. You can tell all your other teachers how much cooler I am.
What are we talking?
See,
I think it was a cool song.
thank you, Daniel.
Miss Warren,
I know it's still going.
I was talking to Travis yesterday and he said he'd be interested in doing that UIL maps and graphs.
Atta boy.
I went ahead and signed and filled in the papers for you, Travis.
Were you going to do it, Corbin? If you don't have to, if you don't want to. Okay. Okay. I got people. I got people doing it. First battle of the Civil War.
What do we title this?
You could say Civil War continued.
I'll give you the study papers, Travis.
Does that mean the South is fort now too?
I'm sorry?
South of that fort now too?
Yeah, the South took over the fort. The Union had to surrender. And of course, that's a really big boost for everybody in the South, of course, the Confederate Army. Now, the last war that the United States had been involved with prior to this was the Mexican War in the 1846, 48. Now, that took place, most of those battles took place down in Texas and Mexico. This is going to take place in their front and backyards. Nobody really had an experience with war and the destruction and the death. Today, we can watch movies, we can read books, we can see old video. This was different. Each side thought it was going to be over in a matter of months. Everybody was going to come home a hero. No one was going to get hurt, and they were both sides figured, yeah, we got this, right? Not so much. Now, the very first land battle that was planned was a place off of just outside of Washington, D.C. called Manassas, Virginia, or Manassas Creek. So sometimes this battle might be referred to as Battle of Manassas. Now, it's called Bull Run. Now, they're both looking for a high area for them to take over. And news of this battle went out, and so people thought, cool, let's make a picnic and go.
Oh my God.
What?
Yeah. So people dressed up in their Sunday best, packed a picnic lunch, went to sit on the side, say, let's see our boys win. Yeah. It wasn't all that. And the Confederates ended up winning. Have you ever heard that phrase, the rebel yell? Okay. Well, they had taught some of their soldiers, as they run out of the field. Well, it kind of freaked the Union soldiers out. They were inexperienced, first of all. They hadn't been trained properly yet. And they were like, ah! And then when they start getting, people, arms are blown off, bullets start flying, blood, explosions, the panic of a battle. Our Union troops went, for me, and took off back home. All right, so the Confederates win that particular battle, and of course the picnickers were like, yeah. What? Oh, yes. There was high casualties in this. And, of course, the Confederates win that battle, which is another boost. But the reason why I'm talking to you about this, it was put things in perspective, that this war was going to be much worse than they thought it was ever going to be on both sides. Yes?
Who's going like the Red Hats?
That is another regiment of Scottish, I believe they were We'll have to talk about them later, but they're a different kind of infantry, and I believe they were made up